Thanks for visiting the Smith Creek 4 Watershed Preservation Channel, where I'm posting information about the Wake Forest 2025 Community Plan. My name is Marty Ludis. I've compiled documentation and video about the CPA 2303 Water Merger Agreement, which involves extraterritorial expansion into 584 acres in Wake County. I live on 2 of those acres, and with this channel intend to prevent Wake Forest's rezoning of this land for their continued residential expansion into Wake County. It's right here on this acreage in rural Wake County where Wake Forest sustained smart growth must be halted. The lack of information and understanding about this ETJ expansion is astounding. It's a massive wildlife corridor of headwater streams, the main channel, riparian forest, and hilly and rugged terrain that all flows into the Wake Forest Reservoir and onto the Neuse River. A combined 1,483-acre wildlife corridor, just 1 mile from downtown Wake Forest. The stakes are high. It's the last remaining forest, and the town is heartily proposing a conventional residential overlay on top of it. If you think we need more clear-cutting in Wake Forest, that's fine. Continue to stand by and just watch it happen. But consider this. Wake County citizens don't want Wake Forest here, and we will defend this forest and our rural lifestyle. In doing this, the watershed must survive. To document Wake Forest's 2025 conservation history, I've already recorded this acreage with drone video and still images. As the town releases information about their desired residential overlay, I'll post that too. If approved, when the deforestation and clear-cutting of the Smith Creek watershed begins, I'll document that too. My compilation will be titled Wake Forest Conservation History 2015 to 2025, a 10-year deforestation project. The Smith Creek Watershed 4 requires protection and preservation, just like the Wake Forest Historic District and the Downtown Historic District does. But in this case, Wake County citizens and this forested acreage need protection from the town of Wake Forest. Importantly, this ETJ expansion and rezoning of 63 occupied residential lots is being administered by the town, and citizens of Wake County it impacts had no say in the process. Should Wake County citizens just stand by and ignore this? Where do Wake County commissioners stand on this expansion? Because this is a perfect example of regulation without representation, where the town of Wake Forest claims a massive amount of acreage for their continued residential growth. Ultimately, this community plan and residential rezoning will be the end of the last surviving forest we have. Listen in on the BOC discussion on this property so you can understand how a water merger agreement is really about ETJ expansion and rezoning plans for a formerly protected area, the Smith Creek watershed. In this video, you'll discover that the watershed is actually a hole that can finally be filled. And I have more information coming. Say no to fill the hole. Wake Forest Board of Commissioners session, July 6th, 2023. Presentation of the Third Amendment to the Wake Forest-Raleigh utility merger.
Okay. Now we will have a presentation of the Third Amendment to the Wake Forest-Raleigh utility merger.
Good evening again, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm going to kind of talk through the agreement that was included in your agenda packet and cover the highlights that are included in this amendment. The first one, as part of the original merger agreement, City of Raleigh had to go through a process of kind of reallocation after they settled all the merger payment fees that all the merger communities paid into. Well, we had overpaid, in summary. And so what we are proposing as part of this agreement is to change our current allocation of 4.91 MGDs of water to 5.32. And that proposed will increase our water allocation annually to accommodate the additional growth that we have. So that's included in here, and it will settle off that overpayment. Next is Exhibit A would be updated. That's included. The updated portions included. You'll see a stippled area in there. That's the area to be included in the amendment.
This is my first clarification, and I'm displaying the stippled area in the amendment chart. This area represents 584 acres in Wake County that currently is protected by Wake County R80W Smith Creek Watershed Guidelines. But that is soon to change with this agreement and the town's new community plan proposal for residential construction here. You won't hear discussion about the Wake Forest 2015 Smith Creek Watershed Plan, because now, as Wake Forest expands their territory to Wake County, they are administratively delisting it so that water and sewer can be installed. The clerical groundwork has been going on for years, and before the plans are approved and excavators arrive, we must take action to stop this expansion. I expanded the agreement map and included the Wake Forest Reservoir, and above it, the Smith Creek headwater streams in the 584-acre agreement. The Skeleton Creek lines and water body are quite self-explanatory. In great detail, they provide a simplistic, two-dimensional perspective to a very rare, valuable, and now endangered wildlife corridor the town has set their sights on for more housing. Note the town's yellow perimeter that clearly designates their next residential expansion zone. But recognize this is a line that I and citizens in Wake County must defend. We know how the town approves projects and developers destroy and reinvent land for maximum density and population growth. There's evidence everywhere. The town remains deaf to the justified complaints of overpopulation created by outside public land developers who clear-cut the trees, erase vegetation, and callously evict and display no regard for wildlife. Terrain destruction such as this is standard operating procedure, so the same house can be positioned side by side, with little, if any, space in between. They effectively use the town's minimum UDO guidelines to position as many housing units as they can. What you see here in this 60-acre tract is standard operating procedure for Wake Forest sustained smart growth slogans that employ high-density housing and maximum population growth. The temporary mountain is exactly what Wake County citizens will not tolerate in our Smith Creek watershed. You have no mandate for your 118,000 population goal, and you surely did not have any invitation to meet that goal by extending your ETJ and do this in the Wake County portion of the Smith Creek 4 watershed. Rural Wake County does not want the new Wake Forest HOA lifestyle here. The water merger agreement is about one thing: freeing up a former watershed protected area so that Wake Forest can approve 3 house per acre residential construction in the 605 water pressure zone. As you look at the main Smith Creek Channel here in Wake County, recognize that this is the ETJ expansion area Wake Forest defined in the community plan and laid out in the Raleigh merger agreement. Let me read it to you. Whereas Wake Forest has requested that the service area covered by the merger agreement be expanded to include the 2023 amendment area, which is within Wake County and which Wake Forest plans to be part of its extraterritorial jurisdiction. Let me repeat. The 2023 amendment area, which is within Wake County and which Wake Forest plans to be part of its extraterritorial jurisdiction. Now back to the session.
The next item actually covers density cap on that area that's amended in Exhibit A. 3 units an acre is the max density that would be allowed in this area. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is City of Raleigh, in conjunction with Wake Forest, did a sewer allocation study as well as a water allocation study, and it can easily handle up to 3 units an acre with any planned changes to the Raleigh system to date that are funded. That also the area is north of our reservoir, and if we cap it at 3 units an acre, it will allow for lower density, which will also help preserve our water system that we have there for recreation purposes. So that's another reason of putting a cap at 3 units an acre.
To contradict Tanner's statement about preserving water by having 3 units per acre, somehow that is going to preserve water. Let's look at Joyner Park. This is a recent photograph. Joyner Park, the new recreation center. We have the Pate project, which is under debate right now here. And we have a relatively small project, 41 acres of, it's called Devon, off of Capitol Boulevard. This obviously was prime property, considering it was right next to Joyner and across the street from a very nice shopping center here with great location off of Capitol Boulevard. So for this study, keep an eye on this little body of water here that's in Joyner Park as I go through the construction process. This is October of 2016. You can see the footprint for Devon is established with all the roads. The 41 acre perimeter is marked with a yellow line. You can see the water in the pond at Joyner is all clear. Let's jump to February of 2019, and you can see the construction for the community center is complete right in here, and they haven't yet started on Devon at this point. And then look at the coloration of the pond. Okay, this is November of 2020, and you can see that Devon has been clear cut, excavated, and the location of the streets in an overlay are visible. And this is ready for construction. And let's go look at the pond and how does it look. It's pretty much the same color as the construction site. I think this is kind of self-explanatory. So here's some good news. In May of 2022, the water in the pond looks clear. They're already building some of the homes along the back line. I'm very familiar with this project because I drove through here a number of times and watched it being developed. Now let's go to April of 2023 and look again at the end note that it's the same color as the retention pond here they established for the Devon project. And now this is June of 2024, and we got a good report card based on the color. The retention pond looks better, and it almost matches. This is catching up. It's starting to clear up a little bit, but now we're back to where it should be. And finally, this is the most recent photograph that's available, and we can see that the water in the retention pond and in the little pond there is the same color. I put a white line extending from Capitol Boulevard all the way through Joyner Park. And with that line, we can examine the elevations. Now at the very top of the line, we're at 402 feet. That's Capitol Boulevard is 402 feet elevation. And then we'll move along to the Devon project, and you can see in the lower section how the terrain is lowering in a decline. And guess where it's going to go? Of course, right into the pond. And then it rises again, and then this water is part of another drainage area. This is somewhat of a swale here. So the only place where turbidity can form is from here, from this excavation. And we have a very small sample size, 41 acres. I forget how many houses are in here. I think there's 130 houses and townhouses here. So they put up silt fencing. They put up a fence along here. And that's what's supposed to protect the eventual water runoff when it rains. What does Wake Forest do? Ask Wake Forest, what do they do when this occurs? And as it stands right now in this current photograph, the pond seems to be okay, with the exception, of course, with the problem that we had in 2024 where there was some type of sewer malfunction and they had to shut the pond down. Let's do another turbidity study, and the area that Courtney Tanner is talking about is right here. This is 584 acres that the town of Wake Forest is going to take on with their ETJ and eventual rezoning of all this. And you can even see from here the decline, the natural decline of the elevated area down to where Smith Creek runs. What I want to show you now is this site right here. This should be a lesson for what's going to be done up here, because this was developed. Well, let's just go back to it. Let's go back to the development. Let's go back to 2008 when this shopping center was being developed. And of course we've got the reservoir here and the CPA 2303 acreage here. Now in around this area or time 2008, there was going to be a shopping center put in. So let's go to December of 2009 and the excavation for the shopping center. All knowing that this is the main channel of Smith Creek, runs through the reservoir, comes through here, you might be familiar with it, and it goes under the bridge here, and it travels right along here. And maybe we could benefit by looking closer at this area. And now you can see where it's all cleared, and what they have to do when there's such a big elevation change, they have to lower this side and then they have to raise this side, and you raise it by retaining walls, and that's why you see retaining walls all over, because to develop something you want to create a shelf so that you can pour concrete for foundations. And for this shopping center, a tremendous amount of work had to be done, and you can barely see, but Smith Creek is running right through here. So let's do a turbidity study and use common sense and see what happens by following the elevation from the intersection here all the way up into this region to the right. All right, I'm going to begin at the intersection right at around 320 feet. You can look above and below and watch. So we have somewhat of a level area, an actual swale right here, and we have a little bit of a rise here, and then all of a sudden from this point on we have this downward decline. And 257 Of course, you know what that is. That's Smith Creek at 257. And look above it, we've got all this green. You notice that pond is nice and the color of the pond. Now, unfortunately, with this photograph, you're not going to be able to see what you know exists, and that is turbidity from what we learned at the Devon project. When you clear cut and you have this decline and you have water below it, you get turbidity or brown sedimentation. So when Courtney Tanner says that the 3 houses per acre will help preserve our water system, what's she talking about? We've witnessed it. One more quick turbidity study. This is a current photograph of Burlington Mills Road, Capitol Boulevard here, Burlington running across, and Smith Creek. There's the Burlington Mills Road Bridge. Smith Creek coming up through here, all the way through here, and it bifurcates. One branch going that way, another branch going this way, all the way up. This one going all the way up to here. So this is a current photograph of what's going on. But let's go back a few years. Now you're looking at February of 1999, but one thing you can see is the future overlay where this is going to be what's developed, and this being Smith Creek here, running through here, all the way down here, Burlington Mills Road. So we move up to March of 2002, same area, Smith Creek, one stream of Smith Creek here, the other one going in this direction. It's not that clearly visible, but you can see here where it has been clear cut. Let's move up to June of 2002 and look at the terrain where we've got all of this. It's almost glowing, and you can see how close this project was to Smith Creek, and also up in here where they're doing some work here. And now you can see where the turbidity from the sediment is affecting Smith Creek as it moves down towards Burlington Mill Road. At a later time, in greater depth, I will go through the Smith Creek watershed. And just to give you a preview, this is the Neuse River right here. Look at the color of the water there. And let's follow through here, Smith Creek. What's the color here? It's pretty self-explanatory what's going on. This turbidity can be viewed from satellite imagery. These 3 examples show you that Courtney Tanner and the town manager, there should be no confidence in them saying that they can conserve or protect water with R3 zoning, which involves excavation, clear cutting. There's no evidence to stand by that they can guarantee that, nor should they even say that. And that is the concern that the people in Wake County and close by that understand the watershed. We know what happens, we know how it happens, and when it happens is when you get that big rain.
We will have to have a supplement, and if this agreement is approved, changes to our land use plan as well that will further capture some of that, and that would be the next step in the process. Another thing here is, regardless of whether or not we expand the area to include what's identified in Exhibit A, there was already a plan to improve water pressure in the downtown zone. Currently, the water pressure is underperforming, and they need to install a new water tower and booster tank. So the purchase of that land at 235 South College Street, including a purchase price of $365,000, is included in this agreement. It's important to note that does have to come through our process for review, since it is located in our jurisdiction, and they have agreed to have a public meeting to explain the tower and potential impacts of the tower. More importantly, they've agreed to site it in such a way to have minimal tree disturbance as possible and save some on site, and we will have the ability to review. If we decide that the plan does not meet the requirements, they're then no longer obligated to even purchase the piece of property, and they would look for another site to meet the water pressure demands that are needed for the downtown.
A few comments about the water tower. Amazing that Tanner assures us that they will protect the trees in the area. During the same session, the town is planning to rezone 584 acres for residential construction in the last forest that remains. The decision to locate the water tower here should be reconsidered. As you can see, this is the original site of Wake Forest's beginning and in the historic district's footprint. Putting a water tower here would cast a daily shadow over this beautiful area, which provides the original sight line approaching town on Durham Road. Where are historic protections when you need them? Additionally, read the summary on the tower from the town manager's office, which says, an elevated water tank and booster which is needed to service existing customers. The booster is needed for the amendment or the 584-acre stippled area, as it's called, and I'll get back to that later.
And those are really the highlights of the different items that are included in the agreement. So if you have any specific questions, I am happy to answer them.
I'm just so excited that we're finally filling in the last donut hole in Wake Forest after 20 years.
Yeah, and it's just kind of a reminder to all the board members, there were several requests to include this area as part of the originally community plan, but at that point we couldn't do it because we couldn't guarantee water and sewer service. So staff was simply not comfortable including it at that time because it almost looked like a false promise. I do receive requests from some citizens that live out there. They can actually see manholes out their windows of their house, but they are not allowed to hook up. Even if their well is failing, they cannot hook up. This merger agreement would allow them to be able to hook up. That's also important to note.
Thank you, Courtney.
You're welcome.
I think it's the time to do this. Okay, thank you. Okay, next is discussion of the monthly financial report. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Eileen?
I'm just so excited that we're finally filling in the last donut hole in Wake Forest after 20 years.
Clearly, this commissioner, apparently speaking for everyone, is outspoken in his belief that this pristine acreage and wildlife corridor, the last forest of Wake, is finally going to be acquired for the expansion of the town's ETJ with a clear directive that the 584 acres all be zoned for 3 houses per acre. This action is incrementally being done in secrecy and without prior communication with the 73 landowners this decision is impacting. I would like to add some information about the water zones, the water tower, the pumping station, and the people who live along Oak Grove Church Road. Tanner was asking about acquiring water in this agreement. Let's look at the map that designates the 3 water pressure zones, and they are 605, 523, and 560. They're all shades of blue, but you can identify them by contrast. For this discussion, I'm only going to focus on zones 605 and 523. The black box is indicated with a WT. That's the water tower the Commissioner's plan on placing in the Historic District, beside the seminary and community center, I need you to follow along and determine how the town manager's office is presenting this merger as it relates to the water tower here. Specifically, let me insert Tanner's comments about the tower being placed in this location.
Another thing here is, regardless of whether or not we expand the area to include what's identified in Exhibit A, there was already a plan to improve water pressure in the downtown zone. Currently, the water pressure is underperforming, and they need to install a new water tower and booster tank.
The merger agreement says something different than what she explained, and let me read it to you. Whereas Raleigh's consultant identified a need for additional water storage in Wake Forest, specifically in the 523 pressure zone, but also a pump station that can serve the 605 pressure zone from the 523 pressure zone, as needed for system reliability. For the people in the Historic District who should object to this tower, in my opinion, I'm pointing out it's clear. The tower and pumping station is for storage for the 605 zone, not necessarily for water pressure in the Historic District. This is because of the strain. All the new housing, mostly condos, apartments on Royal Mill Road, not to mention what they want to build in Wake County. Therefore, the Historic District should not bear the burden of an obtrusive structure on South Main Street like proposed here. Moving to the water zones, note that the 605 zone extends into Franklin County. The developers were allowed to extend water and sewer for this large development. So recognize the community plan is enabling Raleigh to pump water from the Historic District water tower and pumping station in Zone 523 into Franklin County. I can see that making sense. If one owner has property in two counties, you would like them to seamlessly connect, even though it's two jurisdictions. Note how the east side of the 605 water pressure zone is defined by the lot listed as Wake Forest Reservoir property. Also understand the property above it in Franklin County is also owned by the same group, just like the Del Webb development across the street. There will be two counties involved in the community plan. Also note that the remaining part of the merger agreement does not indicate it is in the zoning area, indicating that the 605 water pressure zone already existed. At this date, this is the most current water pressure 605 boundary, and it only includes about 1/3 of the 584 acres that Tanner was talking about. Based on this, it's clear to me the community plan is about rezoning the Watershed property, not acquiring water and sewer because they already had it. Let's get back to Tanner's quote about acquiring water for people who, according to her, have well issues and can't get water.
I do receive requests from some citizens that live out there. They can actually see manholes out their windows of their house, but they are not allowed to hook up. Even if their well is failing, they cannot hook up. This merger agreement would allow them to be able to hook up. That's also important to note.
The most important word here is manholes. The manholes are in the Tryon development, south of Oak Grove Church Road, which was under construction back in 2018. Tanner described some Wake County citizens having well issues and could not get water. But with this merger agreement, they could get water. To understand that, begin with the 605 zone at the top that extends into Franklin County. Then the area that is not assigned a water pressure zone in Wake County. Then look carefully at the 523 zone that includes the Tryon development and Wake Forest residential properties beside the reservoir. If you look carefully at these Wake County 2-acre lots south of Oak Grove Church Road, you can see the Wake Forest residential lots actually border them. You could extend a garden hose to 11 of these lots to acquire water, but according to Tanner, they could not get water from the 523 pressure zone, and you need this community amendment to solve this problem. Why? Why could Franklin County get water and sewer in the 605 zone for Del Webb, but Wake County citizens could not get water from Raleigh through Wake Forest in the 523 zone? Here's the question everyone in the BOC should be asked. Where's the water coming from in this merger agreement for these people who can see manhole covers and, according to the town manager's office, have well issues? Is the water coming from the 523 water pressure zone that borders these parcels? If that's the case, for them to gain access to water, why is the town manager rezoning 63 occupied 2-acre lots zoned R80W to Wake Forest residential zoning, 3 houses per acre in the community plan? I see the town manager and BOC trying to shake down Wake County citizens in the Smith Creek 4 watershed area. It's a quid pro quo. A few citizens get water, and all of the lots get rezoned residential. The citizens who need water adjacent to the 523 pressure zone should gain water access, just like the Franklin County citizens in Del Webb did, without any strings attached. Board of Commissioners, rezone that acreage along Gilcrest Farm Road and clear-cut it like your community plan clearly states, and your decisions will continue to be documented. Like in this video, we will fly a drone over the clear cutting and excavation, and also film it from Gilcrest Farm Road. There is no video footage of R.J. Reynolds moving Wake Forest College to Winston-Salem. It truly was a sad and dark time in 1956. Commissioners, expand your sustained smart growth into Wake County and the Smith Creek Watershed 4 area, and all of you will be given the discredit you deserve, and you will become part of Wake Forest's dubious 2025 conservation history. Obviously, with this approach, we are past the phase of 3-minute talks to the deaf BOC. In the past 10 years, you have deforested Wake Forest, and you have to make room for the 60,000 more people you are preparing for in 2040. We will not stand by and watch you Wake Forest, Wake County. Wake County citizens must stop Wake Forest's growth plans from destroying our rural landscape and supplanting our way of life with this continued metropolitan footprint. The community plan to rezone and deforest the acreage along Gilcrest Farm Road and Oak Grove Church Road must be soundly rejected and prevented. You have added enough residential housing. Stop. You are negating, not adding, not improving this town and country locale. 2, 3, 400 residences next to Del Webb will not improve our lives or your town. Not doing it will. Wake Forest's sustained smart growth must be recognized as anything but smart, anything but sustainable. In a matter of 5 years, the allure of these brand new developments will fade. What must endure is this proximate wildlife corridor, its natural proven riparian buffers, rough terrain, meandering streams, standing water pools and swales, springs and falls. The original name of this community and region, the Forest of Wake, must prevail here, and it's our responsibility to ensure that and defy Wake Forest's preoccupation with residential development and unwanted population explosion. It's past time for citizens to stop complaining about traffic and do something about our earth, water, and wildlife that these carpetbagging developers are permanently removing from our land. It's past time for leadership change. We can't wait for another lot to be scraped away forever as the town prepares for our replacements. Wake Forest, where the college used to be and a forest once stood. Say no to fill the hole. I have included the merger agreement section of the video in its entirety without interruption. This entire session and minor discussion ran 5 minutes and 43 seconds. Obviously, I encourage you to take the time to listen to it again.
Okay, now we will have a presentation of the third amendment to the Wake Forest Raleigh utility merger.
Good evening again, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm going to kind of talk through the agreement that was included in your agenda packet and cover the highlights that are included in this amendment. The first one, as part of the original merger agreement, City of Raleigh had to go through a process of kind of reallocation after they settled all the merger payment fees that all the merger communities paid into. Well, we had overpaid, in summary. And so what we are proposing as part of this agreement is to change our current allocation of 4.91 MGDs of water to 5.32. And that proposal will increase our water allocation annually to accommodate the additional growth that we have. So that's included in here, and it will settle off that overpayment. Next is Exhibit A would be updated. That's included. The updated portion's included. You'll see a stippled area in there. That's the area to be included in the amendment. So that's included. The next item actually covers density cap on that area. That's amended in Exhibit A. 3 units an acre is the max density that would be allowed in this area. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is City of Raleigh, in conjunction with Wake Forest, did a sewer allocation study as well as a water allocation study, and it can easily handle up to 3 units an acre with any planned changes to the Raleigh system to date that are funded. That also, the area is north of our reservoir, and if we cap it at 3 units an acre, it will allow for a lower density, which will also help preserve our water system that we have there for recreation purposes. So that's another reason of putting a cap at 3 units an acre. We will have to have a supplement, and if this agreement is approved, changes to our land use plan as well that will further capture some of that, and that would be the next step in the process. The another thing here is, regardless of whether or not we expand the area to include what's identified in Exhibit A, there was already a plan to improve water pressure in the downtown zone. Currently, the water pressure is underperforming, and they need to install a new water tower and booster tank. So the purchase of that land at 235 South College Street, including a purchase price of $365,000, is included in this agreement. It's important to note that does have to come through our process for review since it is located in our jurisdiction, and they have agreed to have a public meeting to explain the tower and potential impacts of the tower. More importantly, they've agreed to site it in such a way to have minimal tree disturbance as possible and save some on site, and we will have the ability to review. If we decide that the plan does not meet the requirements, they're then no longer obligated to even purchase the piece of property, and they would look for another site to meet the water pressure demands that are needed for the downtown. And those are really the highlights of the different items that are included in the agreement. So if you have any specific questions, I am happy to answer them.
I'm just so excited that we're finally filling in the last donut hole in Wake Forest after 20 years.
Yeah, and it's just kind of a reminder to all the board members, there were several requests to include this area as part of the originally community plan, but at that point we couldn't do it because we couldn't guarantee water and sewer service. So staff was simply not comfortable including it at that time because it almost looked like a false promise. I do receive requests from some citizens that live out there. They can actually see manholes out their windows of their house, but they are not allowed to hook up. Even if their well is failing, they cannot hook up. This merger agreement would allow them to be able to hook up. That's also important to note.
Thank you, Courtney.
You're welcome.
I think it's time to do this.